Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Em and today we are going to do my August wrap up. Remember the last couple months how I have said I wanted to read less so that wrap ups aren't so overwhelming? I kind of did it. I read 18, which is less. I also kind of hated it, so that's something I'm going to have to figure out. But, it's okay. There's nothing wrong with trying something and realizing it doesn't quite work for you. Well, we call that growth. Or I call that growth. I don't know what you call it. I'm calling it growth today. Anyways, let's go ahead and we are going to start with my self-destructing TBR. So kind of a state of how that went. And then after we get that out of the way, then we'll just dive into talking about everything that I read. I had 5 books on my self-destructing TBR this month. I accidentally unhauled one a little early, but just pretend that's there. And I DNF'd 2. I DNF'd A Matter of Temptation by Stacey Reed, and I DNF'd A Queen in Hiding by Sarah Kozloff. I DNF'd A Matter of Temptation because I just found the writing unbearably cheesy, like right off the gate, and I couldn't get around it. So I DNF'd it pretty early. I think I only got 30 pages into it, and it just did not work for me. I have read from this author before and liked what I read. However, I've just been struggling with romance so much lately. Specifically, historical romance has been really challenging. Could have been this book, and that it could have been me. It could have been, who knows? But at the end of the day, it did not work for me. So I DNF'd it. And then A Queen in Hiding, I DNF'd because I was really bored. And again, I didn't get very far into this, but one of the goals for 2023 was to DNF if I wasn't feeling what I was reading, regardless of how far I am or am not into the book. So I did finish The Wedding Crasher. I'll get into my review later. I did finish Cute Mutants, Volume 2, Young, Gifted, and Queer. And then I am currently reading Peace and Turmoil, The Dark Shores, Book 1. This book prompted me to talk to my husband about rules for my self-destructing TBR. Because I'm currently 122 pages out of a lot. So I clearly have a big chunk to go. I have let self-destructing TBR books scooch through when I have been in the process of reading them. However, whenever that has happened, I have been well over 50% of the way through the book when I've gotten to the end of the month. In the spirit of this challenge, we're trying to figure out what made the most sense. And the thing I decided on is that I am going to keep reading it. I'm going to let it roll into September a little bit. However, I am not going to give it the whole month of September. So if I have not prioritized and made significant progress on this book by September 10th, then it is getting the boot. Because while I really like the writing and I'm interested when I pick it up, I have not been prioritizing it. And I have gone multiple days without picking it up. So it gets a little bit longer, but it doesn't get like a hall pass. It has to, I have to make significant progress. So I probably will not do an update with this in September unless I finish it and then it's on my wrap up. But I am not going to update you all about it as part of my self-destructing TBR. So let's roll into what I thought about what I read this month. I started off the month on a nonfiction kick, specifically a medical nonfiction kick. I started the month with the Sawbones book, The Horrifying, Hilarious Road to Modern Medicine. This is by Justin McElroy and Dr. Sydnee McElroy. They are also the co-hosts of the Sawbones podcast, which is a medical, what is it? No, I should know the tagline. A medical tour of misguided medicine. And I gave this a 4.5. I really loved this. And I really loved it as an extension of the podcast. There are going to be a lot of stories that you've heard already if you've listened for a long time. I don't know if I would recommend this if you aren't already familiar with Justin and Sydnee, but I am, and I had access to the audiobook as well. And so it was just like listening to a really long podcast episode, and I don't know, it was a good time. I mean, well, yeah, it was a good time if you find the horrors of medical history a good time, which I generally don't, but sometimes I do. But okay, I'm going to stop talking about it now. After Sawbones, I started Stiff, The Curious Lives of Human Cadavers by Mary Roach, and I gave this a 4. I have considered myself somebody with a pretty strong stomach when it comes to medical stuff, and this book grossed me out. I really like Mary Roach's writing. I read Fuzz by her in the past, but whenever I talk to people about medical history, they always ask if I read Stiff yet, and I hadn't. And then my dad happened to have a copy on his shelves and let me borrow it, so now I can say I've read it. But Mary in this book breaks it up ways that cadavers are used for each chapter. So like the first chapter is about how cadavers are used for plastic surgery or reconstructive surgery surgeons to practice on when they're in med school. And then there's another chapter about how cadavers are used for testing car safety regulations, how they're used to retrace the events of airplane crashes, how they're used for, all different things. And then there's a section about cremation and the different ways corpses are cremated and what works, and how burning bodies has been really harmful for the environment, but what we can actually but ways that bodies can be broken down that doesn't harm the environment or maybe gives back to the environment, but where we bump into some social or religious taboos that make access to those methods more challenging. So it was really interesting, kind of gruesome. I was not prepared for Dr. Oz to be heavily quoted in the later half of the book. I don't know who I would recommend this to. I guess I would recommend this to people who like Sawbones. If you like Sawbones, I would say read Stiff as well. Next, I read Saint Death's Daughter by C.S.E. Cooney. I gave this 4.5. I loved this book so much. It was so weird and so wonderful and so bubbly in a way I was not expecting. This is about Lainey, and Lainey's family is a family of necromancers. So her parents both worked for her kingdom's ruler, but both died really young. And so Lainey is 14, and both of her parents have died, and she's living in their house by herself with their families. Zombie is the wrong word, but she's a being that was brought back to life purely to serve Lainey's family and must do whatever a member of the family tells her to do. And so it's just her and Lainey. And a rival of Lainey's family comes and demands to be paid a debt that is owed her. Lainey, in a panic, summons home her psychotic older sister, and I can't even do a whole plot because this book is so all-encompassing, and even the synopsis that's listed on the back doesn't even begin to cover where we go in this book. Every time I thought I had the plot figured out in this book, it would take a turn, and I wouldn't have the book figured out anymore, and I'd be back at square one, which was really delightful to be surprised that frequently. I really love that aspect of it. I really loved Lainey as a character because, she's a necromancer, but she's a necromancer who is literally allergic to violence. Just being within the vicinity of where violence has happened makes her break out in a physical allergic reaction. And that, how do you be a necromancer and bring people back from the dead if you can't be around, if you can't, be around violence? It's so good. But then Lainey herself is so bubbly and sweet and and there's just this real, I think, effervescence to this book. I think if you are a fan of Tamsin Muir and Gideon the Ninth, you would also like this. But this is like Gideon the Ninth if Gideon was like into like hot pink and glitter and rainbows and joy. Like it's that version of Gideon. Like Gideon is like the real dark, like, you know, moody necromancer, and this is like the bubbly girly girl necromancer. I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know. I would compare it in Tamsin Muir, not to writing style, but I think this voice that Cooney uses in this is entirely unique, entirely different. I haven't read anybody else who writes like this. And it's so crystal clear, but also unique. I absolutely loved it. I want more people to read it because I think it was such a good time and such a joy to read. And then after that, my family and I listened to the audiobook for The Lost Library by Rebecca Stead and Wendy Mass. We listened to this on a road trip to the beach. So it's a real short audiobook. This actually just came out this last week of August. This book we're following Evan, and Evan is in his last week of 5th grade, and he's really nervous about leaving his elementary school. He's gonna have to go to this middle school in the next town over because his town is too small to have their own middle school, and it just means everything is about to change, and he's really nervous about it and is really happy with the way things are. And then we're also following Mortimer, who is the cat that guards the little free library in their town square. And then the other perspective we're following is Al, who is the assistant librarian for the library that burned down about 20 years before the book starts. So there's a little bit of a mystery element. My kids all said that it was good, but honestly Mortimer needed more chapters, which I would agree. Mortimer's chapters really were delightful, and it needed more Mortimer. I think this is a really sweet middle grade book. I've read another book by this author duo before and really liked it. And if you have a middle grade reader or you are a middle grade reader, I would really recommend this. I gave it 4 stars. And since we finished the audiobook, my youngest, who's 8, has since gone back and reread the audiobook at least once, I think, if not twice. So they are a big fan of this one. And the next book I finished was Emperor of Ruin by Django Wexler. This is book 3 in the Burning Blade and Silver Eye trilogy. Okay, so 3rd book in a trilogy, so I'm not going to talk about the plot. I did give this a 4.25 stars. It's not my favorite out of the series. However, I love the way Django treated one of my favorite characters. He made me worried for her. I was real afraid that she was going to get, but he took care of her, which I greatly appreciate. I'm not going to say who it is because I don't want to do any spoilers, but if you want a science fantasy series to read, I would highly recommend this book. It starts with Ashes of the Sun, and I liked that we got more insight into this world, and I liked all the reveals. And I thought this was a good wrap up to the series. It wasn't perfect. There were some things that I didn't love. There were things I would have liked more of. I hate to say it, but I honestly feel like this could have been a little bit longer. It's not even 500 pages, which I know I usually complain about books being too long, but I think in this case, Wexler could have stretched some things out, especially during the final battle. I did feel like that went really fast. Overall, I thought it was a decent way to wrap up the series. And then after that, I read 16 Souls by Rosie Talbot. I gave this 4 stars. This is a YA urban fantasy. This is about Charlie, who lives in York, England, lost his legs due to a severe case of meningitis, and when he was ill with meningitis, he actually died for a short amount of time, and the doctors were able to revive him, and when they revived him, he could see the souls of the dead around him, and he can interact with them, he can talk with them, they can touch him, but nobody else in his life can see them, which has made Charlie's life pretty difficult. So at the beginning of this book, Charlie is in high school. I know in England they call it something else, but he's in high school. He's about to sit for exams, and he's supposed to be studying and getting ready for that. But his ghost friends reveal that a few souls have gone missing in his neighborhood. And so Charlie really embarks on trying to figure out what happened to them. I think if you are a fan of Cemetery Boys, you would also like 16 Souls, though 16 Souls has more body horror than Cemetery Boys does. I wouldn't call 16 Souls horror, but I think it definitely leads into the body horror and is pretty bloody and gruesome. Had a really good time with this. This is a great like spooky season read. So if you're looking to build your spooky TBR and you like YA, I would put 16 Souls on your possibility pile. All right, and then I also read The Siren, the Song, and the Spy by Maggie Tokuda-Hall. This is the follow-up to The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea, and this comes out September 26th. And I gave this a 3.75. I think Maggie Tokuda-Hall is a really great writer. I think her writing is really beautiful. There's something about her books where they are always slower paced than I think they are going to be. As much as I really enjoyed The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea, it does drag a little bit for me, even though I like her writing. So I'm not sure why. This book, we are following a lot of main characters, and I think that pulled down my rating a little bit because I found all the different POVs to be a little distracting. I would have rather we just stuck with our 3 main characters, and even having 3 was a little too much. I got confused and I got distracted. I loved the part about like the decolonization theme. I loved that. I thought that was by far the strongest part of the book. We do connect back to The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea in ways that I think are really interesting. I feel like I'm acting like 3.75 isn't a good rating. It's a good rating. Why do I act like that's not a good rating? And then Wedding Crasher by Mia Sosa. I gave this a 3. This was one of the most ridiculous books I have ever read. So it's contemporary romance. It's fake dating. However, it is the flimsiest of fake dating setups I have ever read. If a subtle breeze would knock over the entire premise. And, I was really enjoying it in the beginning. I thought it was really fun. And then, I don't know, it's like Mia Sosa was like, let me throw every ridiculous trope into this book and then dial that trope up to the nth degree. And I found those really outlandish scenes to take me out of the story. And I liked this book more when it was being earnest. That sentence is going to come back to bite me in the butt later in this wrap up. But anyways, I don't know. It just didn't work for me. Which may be the book. It may just be because it's a romance and I'm struggling with romance. Who knows? I certainly don't. But I didn't love this. All right, and then after that, I read Ninth Rain by Jen Williams. This is for Stephanie's Patreon book series read-along thing. And I gave this a 3.5. And I struggled with this one. Again, not because of the book. I took too long to read this. I took more than 2 weeks to read this, which I think I said in an earlier video this month is kind of the kiss of death for me. If I take more than 2 weeks to read a book, my involvement, my engagement. So that was my fault for taking too long. But this is very much a road trip fantasy. We have a world that is recovering from like an almost apocalyptic battle, and which is many years in the past, but you can see where the scars remain in both the land and in the people that live in this land. And we're following 3 characters who are searching for the answers to some questions. And I am going to read book 2 because it's for the read-along. I already own it. And I want to see if I can correct the mistakes I made and like book 2 more than I liked this book. Right, and then after that, I read A Sinister Revenge by Deanna Raybourn. I gave this one a 4, but I am actually going to drop it down, I think, to a 3.5, because I did not like how this book ended. I didn't like the mystery. I don't like how the mystery resolved. I loved what she did with Stoker and Veronica's relationship. But so in this book, Stoker and Veronica are going to Tiberius's country house because Tiberius belonged to this group of boys in his university years, and one of his friends back when they were all 20 died under mysterious circumstances, and now Tiberius and his friends have been receiving notes saying that that friend was murdered and that they are to blame and that somebody is going to revenge that death. And so Tiberius basically brings Veronica and Stoker in to figure out who is threatening him and his friends. So it's a little bit of a locked room mystery. I love a country party. I think that's really fun. I love that Veronica was set back on her heels a little bit on this book. I just thought this dynamic between her and Stoker was really fun. There was kind of that tension again. I wish, I don't know. I just wish maybe she would stop doing mysteries, because I feel like the last several mysteries have not worked for me. And I don't know what Veronica and Stoker would do if they weren't solving mysteries, but I think I would. I don't know. I just don't know that the mysteries are working for me anymore. Ending of this was so perfect. It for those two, and it knotted up so neatly that if you had told me this is the last book in the series, I would have believed you, because it felt like a really good place to leave Veronica and Stoker. So I'm a little nervous for the next book, because I don't know what she's gonna do. I'm kind of hoping this series ends soon, because I do find my joy and my engagement dwindling a little bit with each subsequent book, and I don't want to get to a place where I don't look forward to Veronica and Stoker anymore. Oh my gosh, we're almost there, friends. Can we do it before my storage is full? Next, I read Cute Mutants by S.J. Whitby. This is volume 2, Young, Gifted, and Queer. I gave this how much did I give this? I gave this 4.25 stars. The stakes were so high in this book. Can't even see my hand. It's so far out of the screen. But the stakes were so high in this book for Dylan and her friends. In this book, their mutant powers have become the knowledge of this government organization who wants to train the cute mutants to use their powers and to help the New Zealand government, and with varying degrees of reluctance or excitement, they agree to do this, but then quickly find out that things are not what they dreamed they would be in their X-Men fantasies. I think the friendships grow in a really great way in this book. The relationships grow. I love Dylan. I love just everything about her story arc. I will say this book is really sad in a way that I was not prepared for, and one of my kiddos reads this series as well along with me, and they haven't read this one yet, and I'm a little nervous for them to read it just because it is so sad in a way the first one wasn't. Also, there was a fair amount of violence in the first one, and I feel like there was way more violence and way more gore in this one than there was in the last one. So just keep that in mind, depending on what your violence threshold is. Though I feel like most of the books I talk about have a fair amount of violence in this, and I don't think it's out of line with anything else that is in this stack, but I just was not prepared for it to be as violent as quickly. The murder bot stuff real fast. So I did reread Network Effect this month. I also read Home, which is a short story, and Compulsory, which is a super short story. So I finished my Murderbot reread, loved it, recommend, 10 out of 10, would do again, and no notes. I love Murderbot. I'm so excited for the next book in November. I also read Thornhedge by T. Kingfisher, which is her new book that just came out in August. I have a reading vlog where I read this and I talk about this. I gave this a 3. I don't like earnest fairy tales is what I have decided. This book is very earnest. It's very sweet. It was too sweet for me. I think if you like earnest and sweet books, you will probably really like this. When I told my husband that I didn't like it because it was too earnest, he got real excited because he loves an earnest book. So if you are also a fan, then I say you would probably like this. I did really love Toadleen, our main character. I just didn't like the ending that T. Kingfisher gave her. I wanted more for Toadleen than what she got at the end of this book. Y'all, this is my only 5-star book for this whole month. What the heck? How did I only have one 5-star read? All right. Ugh. So my 5-star read for this month was Ivelisse Explains It All by Andrea Beatriz Arango. It's middle grade. It's a novel in verse. It's so good. It is so freaking good. Please, please pick up this book if you are a middle grade reader. It fuzzed my way. It was incredible. I read it in 2 sittings. I couldn't put it down. It deals with anxiety and depression and having a grandparent who has Alzheimer's and being in a single parent household and healing from trauma and grief. And it was so beautiful. Ivelisse is such an unforgettable middle grade character. Yes, there are heavy topics, but I feel like we need to have those heavy topics represented for this age group. And I loved it so much. Please, 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 please read. Hide my face. Please read this book. It was so good. Also, my only 5-star of the month, so I don't know. There's also one book that I'm not going to talk about because it is for a secret project. Though if you look at my wrap up on Instagram, you can figure out which book that is, but that's okay. Don't worry about it. I will be talking about that in a vlog coming in September, which means the final book I'm going to talk about that I just finished like an hour and a half ago is Labyrinth Heart by M.A. Carrick. This is book 3 in the Rook and Rose series. I gave this 4.25 stars. Is that what I gave it? That's a lie. I gave this 4.5 stars. This was such a beautiful way to finish out the series. I liked this so much. If you are a Vargo stan, read this book. It's so good. I loved it. I love Vargo so much. And I respect so much an author or authors who can write a character that in book 1 I kind of hate and turn him into one of my favorite characters in the series. I love this book. You know, the thing about M.A. Carrick, if you have not picked up this series yet, that they do in their books is the first half is a little slower paced because we're just doing, in each book, we're doing establishing the mood, establishing the vibe, establishing where all the characters are, where the city is, because the city is almost a character in this book. And then halfway through, there is an emotional gut punch. And then from that point on, it's just nonstop action. I feel like I spend the first half of these books reading them so slow. And then once that emotional thing happens, I cannot turn the pages fast enough to find out what is going to happen. And it is masterfully done. I love this trilogy so much. A Mask of Mirrors is still my favorite, but that is also the only one I have reread at this point, so I will be interested to see how I feel about this book and The Liar's Knot once more time has passed and I go back and I reread the trilogy, because I love the ending. I love what they did for my characters. It was just, it's so good. So good. Whew, that is it, friends. That is my wrap up for August. Thank you so much for watching. I feel like I read a little bit less, but then also this video is longer, so we'll see how that works out in editing, but that is future Emily's problem. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for spending your precious time with me. I really appreciate it. If you would like to leave a comment, but you don't really have anything in particular you want to say, let's leave a composition book emoji, and I will talk to you all in the next one. Bye.